This lecture is designed to help you learn a little bit about the populations with whom we will be working this semester. We're going to have different groups in our class from Townsend University assigned to different health fairs at different schools. And this lecture is going to introduce you to a little bit about your populations. You're going to have to do a little bit more information digging and research to find out more details, but this is a good way to start to learn about who your populations are. We're going to be working with children from kindergarten to grade 7 this semester. So to start with kindergartners, they're very active. They love silly jokes, they like to tell silly jokes, and they like to listen to silly jokes. They begin to know right from wrong at this age, so it's much easier to teach them what to do or not do. It's at this age that they start to develop their hand preference, and you start to see people being left or right hand dominant, or they may be ambidextrous. In regards to toileting, they're able to wipe and wash with little to no assistance. However, they sometimes still need someone to help them. Most kindergartners know their colors, shapes, and numbers. They know that stories have beginning, middles, and ends. Their attention span is about 15 minutes long. They understand past and present, and they're able to follow simple multi-step directions. So a person in kindergarten might be able to follow a 3-step direction that said something like, stand at your desk, pull out the chair, sit down. Those are 3 simple multi-step directions they could probably follow. As students move to 1st grade, they begin to refine the physical skills they have. They don't typically learn a lot of new physical skills, but they spend a lot of time refining the skills they have. They have better hand-eye coordination, which helps them with skills such as hitting a ball with a baseball bat or a softball bat or a wiffle bat. So that eye-hand coordination really helps them with their physical skill refinement. They have better timing, so they're able to dance to music and dance to the actual beat versus just moving and looking like there's no connection to the music playing. They begin to think logically, and they have reasonable, logical thought processes, and you can have a more reasonable, logical discussion with a 1st grader. They have a better sense of time, so they have a better understanding of what an hour or a half hour means. They begin to be able to demonstrate their learning strengths because at this point they know where they're strong and they can actually demonstrate those skills. As early as 1st grade, they try to develop independence from others, which is a pretty big step for someone in 1st grade. They know right from wrong at this age, and they are better losers. They still like to win, but when they lose, they don't typically have temper tantrums, scream and cry and throw things. While they would rather win, if they lose, they might just sulk or get a little teary-eyed, but they don't behave like they did in earlier years. And their language at this point becomes better developed, and they're actually better at using past tense, present tense verbs, and noun-verb agreement when they speak. The next group of students are 2nd and 3rd graders, and these are typically 9 and 10-year-olds, and they have stamina that's improved, which means they can play a lot longer than they could in the past before they get tired, and they continue to refine their physical skills. They also improve in small muscle coordination, and one of the biggest places that you find small muscle coordination is in the hands and fingers. And so this is why typically writing begins to happen in the 2nd and 3rd grade, is cursive writing. Boys, however, do not develop that muscle coordination typically until 4th grade. So the muscle coordination in their hands actually helps them refine some of those physical skills that might require fine motor control. They understand cause and effect, and so it's easier to teach them if they do X, Y is the consequence, And they start to understand, well, if they don't do X, then Y is not going to be a consequence. Their attention span increases to 30 to 40 minutes, which is very helpful when you think about the timing of school classes. They love puns, jokes, and riddles. It's something they really enjoy. They also like to test out bad words just for shock value. They like to say the bad words to see what people say or do. So if they say a bad word and everybody laughs, of course they're going to say it again because they understand cause and effect. I curse, adults laugh, I'm going to curse again. They're often start to feel insecure because while they're trying to become more independent, they're not secure with who they are and what they can do. They also have swings in emotions, and that means they might go from being happy and helpful in 1 minute to rude and selfish the next. They become more interested in their peers and peer influence increases. So as early as 9 and 10-year-olds, they start to really align with their peers, and they want to be more like their peers. They have dramatic emotional swings, and they often become very impatient with themselves and with others. And for the first time, they can really start to see and understand other people's points of view. The next age group are early to middle adolescents, and this is anywhere from like 10 to 14, 10 to 13 years old, and so it goes from 4th grade up to 7th or 8th grade. In early to middle adolescence, one of the tasks that these young adults or children have to accomplish is they begin to achieve independence from their parents. And again, this is very scary. They want to be independent from their parents, but sometimes they are not secure with doing that. So sometimes you'll see this age group fluctuate back and forth from being extremely dependent on a parent to not being dependent at all. They start to adopt peer codes and lifestyles, and this means they want to act like their friends, they want to dress like their friends, they want to talk like their friends, they'll listen to the same music as their friends. That connection to a peer group is extremely important. They also begin to have increased importance to body image. This happens more quickly with girls than boys. But what happens with girls and later with boys is they understand how important it is to stay clean, wash their hair, make sure their clothes match. All of those items become more important to them. And this is a stage where they really start to identify themselves and they start to really develop strong identities. In this age group, and we're going to be working with this age group a lot this semester, you have to realize that they're going through drastic changes. And some 4th graders begin menstruating, developing breasts, having nocturnal emissions or wet dreams, and some 4th graders don't. And you might see a 7th grader who's 6 foot tall and muscularly developed, and you might have another 7th grader who is skinny and hasn't had any muscular development and is only 4.5 foot tall. So there's great variation in this age group, and that causes stress for a lot of them. So physically, there's great variation. Emotionally, this group really struggles. Their emotions are all over the place. Like I said earlier, they could be happy and then the next minute be crying. And it's not even clear what's happening and why they're crying. Socially, they have a lot of issues where they're trying to make friends. They want to fit in. Academically, the grades that are very difficult for students, 4th grade is very difficult because there's so much learning that happens, and it's one of the major years of testing in elementary school. 6th grade is a hard transition year because they're going from elementary to middle school. But academically, 7th grade is the most difficult year. If you ask anyone, all the teachers in middle school will tell you that 7th grade is where things really fall apart. You can have a straight A student all of a sudden be getting C's and D's. And if the parents can just stick with it and support their children through that year, somehow it turns around. And it's most likely all the physical, emotional, social stuff that's going on. They just don't have enough energy to focus academically. And spiritually in middle school is usually where students start to question their parents' religious beliefs. So if they've been raised to believe in God, it's natural at this age to start to question that. So these are some characteristics of adolescence. Again, this is 4th through 7th or 8th grade. Emotional extremes, interests in their peers. It's at this age, varying for different kids, different ages, where they start to have sexual interest in either the same or the other sex, or both sexes. And so their sexual identity happens, and if they don't quite fit what's normal in other people's eyes, that also brings some stress to them. They're egocentric in that they believe they are the center of the universe and everybody should be looking at them and thinking about them. They believe they are invincible. They believe nothing bad will ever happen to them. They want to be independent from adults. And they are risk takers. And when you combine those characteristics, that puts this age group at extreme danger for certain types of injuries, accidents, illnesses, etc. So this chart, and you have the slides without the voice, and I would ask you to look at the slides without the voice and really look at this. So the first column right here, this lists the causes of death for 15 to 24-year-olds in 1990. And in 1990, they did not separate out more than 15 to 24-year-olds. And you can see accident, suicide, homicide. They're the top 3. Then for the 15 to 24-year-olds in the age group in 2007, it shows the top 3 are still accidents, suicide, and homicide. And if you notice, HIV infection is in both of these. However, diabetes is in 2007, but not 1990. And then 2015, which is the most recent data I could find, you still have accidents, suicide, and homicide at the top. HIV is no longer here. Diabetes moves down a little bit. Cerebrovascular, those are strokes. And you can see what's going on. And in 2015, we can separate that data further than just 15 to 24. We can break it down to 15 to 19. In 2007, we have for 10 to 14-year-olds, these are the middle school students with which you'll be working, and some of the elementary school. These are high school students. So in middle school in 2007 and 2015, these are the 2 things we have here. You have accidents, cancer, homicide, suicide. These are 10 to 14-year-olds. Suicide is the 4th leading cause of death in 2007. And you can see that they have congenital issues, heart disease, lung issues, pneumonia, stroke, and benign neoplasms, or tumors that are not cancerous. When you look at 2015, which is closer to where we are now, you can see that suicide has moved up to number 3, and homicide has moved to number 4. So there's a lot of violence in this age group, and the fact that we need to worry about 10 to 14-year-olds committing suicide is a pretty strong indication of the type of world in which they live and how they feel, and that that's actually an option that they feel is the only option they might have. Then in 2015, we're able to add, because we're going to work with elementary school students, for 5 to 9-year-olds in 2015, accidental unintentional injuries are first, then cancer, then congenital, then murder. So you still have murder in the top 4. However, in this age group, elementary school age, suicide is not present. So you really need to start to look at these causes of death for the age groups with whom we're going to work, so you can start to understand them and then try to figure out what behaviors are occurring that lead to these leading causes of death. And I'll leave you to do that on your own and with your groups. So since the leading cause of death for most of the students with whom we're going to work is unintentional injury, I wanted to talk about the types of unintentional injuries that occur. These are the unintentional injuries that occur from most often to least often, but these are the top 5. Accidental injury or death most often is a motor vehicle accident. It could be drug driving, not using seat belts, not wearing a helmet, like on a motorcycle. The second most frequent is accidental shooting, and this is if someone accidentally shoots someone else. Sometimes accidentally shoots themselves. Fire, dying in a fire or burning, dying of poisoning, and dying of drowning. Those are the leading causes of unintentional injury for this age group. Violence in relationship to homicide and suicide. Suicide, the number one cause or means of suicide is the use of a firearm, and the number one cause of homicide, or the way homicide occurs, is with the use of a firearm. Then you have suicide with suffocation and poisoning. Those are the second and third most often that occur, and homicide with knife or cutting. So those are some, just to give you some ideas of the violence that occurs in this age group. When it's suicide or homicide, what the ways that the suicide or homicide are occurring for this age group. So what next? On this slide, there is a link where you can get more information from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and that will help you learn more about your populations. You can put in different age groups and different behaviors to see what's going on with your population. There's other ways to find information about your age groups, and that would be really, most of it is through the Centers for Disease Control or the National Institutes of Health. So I hope this starts to get you to think about who our populations are and what you're going to be doing to work with them through this semester.